I sat on the stairs with him and said, I give up with you, like you're better than I am at this. You can make me cry. You can make me be awful. You can make me feel helpless. And you can make me feel crazy. And you're really good at it. So I quit. I will, however, if you want us to help each other, try to figure out why you need to do this. I'm game, but otherwise, I can't. So I think that was the first time I saw that I had the capacity to hate. I think I knew that, but hate was not a word allowed in my childhood. And did I really have a childhood? That's always been a question. I needed to get in touch with the feelings that were evoked in me as I did the work. The price I paid in my marriage, having a relationship, was only when I started to do the work on my side of the street.
Welcome to Consciousness Compass, and today we're diving into territory most of us spend our lives avoiding: the shadow, the splits within us, the places where we hide what we cannot bear to see in ourselves. My guest today is Carol Smalldino, a 79-year-old psychotherapist still in practice, author of The Human Climate, Facing the Divisions Within Us and Between Us, and someone who refuses the safety of clinical distance. She's a Brooklyn-born, Italian-speaking Jewish New Yorker, now in Colorado, with what she calls a dancing mind and an alter ego named Dr. Ethel, who shows up in orange from head to toe with an English accent. Here's what drew me to Carol. She's done something quite rare. She's connected Jung's shadow work to our current political nightmare and had admitted her own trauma as a therapist and insisted that we cannot save the world by understanding alone. We have to feel our way through. This conversation won't be comfortable, but I sense that Carol doesn't do comfortable. If you're willing to look at what you've been hiding from yourself and how that hiding might be destroying everything you love, then stay with us. Carol, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Can I add the mention of my new book?
Go for it.
That's Vulnerability Protected, Visions of a Dancing Mind, and it should be available within a month.
I'll put that in the show notes. Well, you wrote something that stopped me cold. I started thinking that understanding could substitute for working through or out, and that approach didn't work very well. I would suggest this might be heresy in therapeutic circles, and maybe especially in Jungian psychology, where we love our interpretations, our elegant symbol reading. But you're saying understanding became a defense for you, a way to avoid the feeling through of your own wounds. James Hillman warned us about this too, what he called the flight to the archetypal, where we interpret everything symbolically to avoid the raw reality of our lives. It's a sophisticated form of disassociation dressed up as depth. What were you avoiding when you hid behind understanding, and what did it cost you?
First, this began when I was really young. There was a lot of conflict, and my mother would say, when it came to something with one of my brothers that was very unpleasant, she said, you have to understand. You have to understand he had a difficult childhood. Okay, I'm having one now, but never mind that. You just have to understand. And somehow I thought, I'll understand and I'll become a psychologist. So I'll understand, and that will help me. The one thing I can point to as a creative act in my childhood is that I played psychologist. I made up the whole thing. I had my friend Diane. She was a willing participant. She stood at the door. I asked her to knock. I gave her a problem. She came in and I solved it. And so I asked her to go out again. We kept doing this. I don't really know how often. The biggest balloon popping was when I decided I was just going to save as many people as I could. Not only did I want to understand, but I wanted to be a good person because I felt that I was kind of a cranky kid. I never wore pink. My mother thought I looked good in red, and I do, but still, in those days, pink was sweet, pink was feminine. I thought I would be nice and kind and help save people. I worked in the welfare department. I was pretty good at it. Then I worked in residential treatment and everything fell apart because any kind of sweetness was slapped in the face by these kids who had been really traumatized and knew how to do what a lot of people are doing today, knew how to evoke helplessness in a very big way, and knew how to evoke not only helplessness, but not very good girl kinds of feelings. I want to kill this kid. How can I want to kill this kid? I mean, he's already suicidal and he's already been traumatized, and I am a terrible person and I should leave the field. I sat on the stairs with him and said, I give up with you like you're better than I am at this. You can make me cry. You can make me be awful. You can make me feel helpless. And you can make me feel crazy. And you're really good at it. So I quit. I will, however, if you want us to help each other, try to figure out why you need to do this. I'm game, but otherwise, I can't. So I think that was the first time I saw that I had the capacity to hate. I think I knew that, but hate was not a word allowed in my childhood. And did I really have a childhood? That's always been a question. I needed to get in touch with the feelings that were evoked in me as I did the work. The price I paid in my marriage, having a relationship, was only when I started to do the work on my side of the street. I've worked with a man called Terry Real, and he says we marry our unfinished business. It was really looking at Lino, that's his name, and seeing reluctantly that he had his own point to make. I wasn't always right, and I didn't always have the only point in the room. And B, I was feeling some of what he was feeling, and I thought it was just him. I paid a big price because when I was younger, I thought he would complete me when I met him. I'll move to Italy, in the South, no less, where it was very conservative. I'll make pasta, spaghetti, and I'll have a smile on my face, as if I were a very simple person. I've paid a very big price. I am thankful, and I don't do gratitude very gracefully because when it's forced, it irks me, but I am thankful that people are at my age and above working on trauma. Gabor Mate is older than me. I'm so grateful that he exists in the world and he's still doing it. He talks about growing old, not just getting old. In Colorado, they have psychedelic assisted psychotherapy that's legal. I'm doing that. I can't really avoid the fact that I am this age. I have to face it, but I don't feel like the jig is up. I feel I have the energy to keep doing the work. And right now in America, you know how psychotic it is. I definitely have some passion about it.
It's incredible how the mind can be on one timeline and the body's on another. This physicality will rot eventually. It will wither. I've spoken to clients who are 80 and they keep telling me physically they feel 80, but mentally they feel 30. There seems to be two timelines going on. When did you realize that knowing about your trauma wasn't the same as being with it?
It's a good question. My first answer is 5 years ago. I have felt my trauma more deeply in the past few years. I was moving through it, not talking about it. When I first started the psychedelics, the psilocybin, it was so hard and I felt so young. I felt like I would never stop crying. It felt like I had to be there. The Human Climate took me 10 years to write. It's a thin book. It's not a very dense book and it's not a very big book, but I think I was really coming to the Jungian shadow. While I was writing it, I was thinking with a beginner's mind, how could the Holocaust have happened? There was a book in the house we had at the time in Italy. I looked up, speaking of synchronicity, and there was this book, The Undiscovered Self. I opened it up to a page that said, people are concerned about the dictator states, but when you think of it, it really is a natural consequence of all the atrocities that have happened in Europe between European countries, and a consequence of colonization, and a consequence of slavery and genocide in America. It could happen anywhere. He said, these crimes were conducted by a man. I am a man. Therefore, I could do that. We are all potential murderers. I don't know if I can deal with this. I wanted some more distant explanation, but he pushed it back on me. And I really began to believe it. And I do believe it. And it's very frustrating now because the people on the more liberal side of politics feel so naive to me. And it's very hard to sit down with them because they have a closed fraternity sorority and they are like, oh my God, how could this happen? Look what he's doing now. Watch Ray Donovan. It's a mafia show. It's very well done. It's like The Sopranos. Watch that and learn about how people recognize their own terribleness. They see that in what's going on and they plan and strategize for that. And they try to find ways to reach people based on intuiting where the other person is rather than dancing in the streets. I was a protester against Vietnam, and we had the feeling, and I think it was justified, that we could change the world. It's like a feel-good exercise in look at how many millions turned up. I'm thinking, all right, so what's the next step? What is the next step? One of the things that I learned in terms of my actual work was that, let's say I was working with a parent and a child, and the parent was very strict or very into power struggles. And I helped that parent get to know her own sadness or the grief or anger about all kinds of other things. But I also helped that parent to anticipate resistance on the part of the child. If you change a game plan and you've done it one way for a few years, that child becomes addicted like any of us. We become habituated to what we know. I would tell the parent, this is not going to go smoothly. Let's prepare for what could happen. And I'm available for what could happen rather than just one big action or statement of wisdom. And then you think it's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. And the idea that kept coming through my mind and still does is that emotions trump logic all the time.
You said you wanted to save others and it took time to realize that this would not save me. Then you add, and I love this honesty, I'd still like to save the world, but that kind of thing is slow to die. I see this as the helper's dilemma, the therapist's shadow, or maybe the activist's curse, the rescue fantasy. Here's what I find fascinating is you're not pretending you've transcended it. You're saying it's still there, this Sisyphean compulsion, pushing the boulder up the mountain, knowing it'll roll back down, but you can't stop pushing, even with all your awareness. What's underneath the rescue fantasy for you? What wound or terror does it protect you from?
As you were asking me, and you talked about saving the world, I was thinking that I really wanted to save my parents and I wanted to save the grown-ups so they could save me and let me be a child so I don't have to be so exhausted. Also, there was a terrible disappointment. I talk about the gift of disappointment and how disillusionment when we first learn that things and people are not perfect is a huge disappointment. It's gruesome, it's terrible, but the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, the becoming an adult, the becoming more independent is a consolation. Plus, for me, the biggest consolation there is I have to face this, but it's not my fault. I don't think I ever had that. So I think disappointment for me was too global. And a part of me held on to this fairy tale, like when I grow up, it's going to be better. When I become a princess or a damsel in distress or something, it'll be better. Then I come to realize that the people who are running the show are so inadequate. Like, I want to say stupid, really. They're just incapable. And I feel two things. I feel like I can help because I know more about myself than I used to. Maybe I can help some of these guys because people are stuck with their delusions. But there's another part of me that identifies with the child that says, you're fucking kidding. Smart people cannot be so stupid, but they can be. It's very sad. I suppose thinking I can change it gives me a little dose of hope. People say this all the time. I think James Baldwin was known as saying he was an optimist because he was alive. And to be alive is an optimistic situation. I am a reluctant optimist because I make such a bad pessimist. So, quick Jewish joke. I'm not pro-Israeli, just make that clear. But three Jewish men, on to three Jewish men, sit at a cafe in Tel Aviv. One says, I'm an optimist. No, no, no. He says, I'm sorry. He says, I'm a pessimist. And the other says, yeah, I'm a pessimist too. And the third pipes up and says, I'm an optimist. One of them says, so tell me, if you're an optimist, why do you look so worried? He says, you think it's easy to be an optimist? There you have it. It's like knowing that if hope dies, it feels like death. So I can't stop hoping. If this country survives, it may become like Germany and there may be some introspection, but it's hard to even think that because Americans are not prone to that. I think, as you've said, I'm 79 and my husband's older, but I do have dual citizenship and we're still kicking and we can still spend several months a year in Italy or in any part of Europe. And that is not an impossibility. Part of me doesn't want to spend my final years in fascism, and I probably have the collective unconscious of Jews all over the world who stayed too long and were in concentration camps as a result. I don't want to be one of those people. Even if I'm older, I think they had to take Sigmund Freud out from under his house in Vienna. He didn't want to go. He, really smart man, didn't get it. He didn't really believe it.
So how do you work with it now? Not eliminating it, but be in right relationship with it.
Well, the pun of the word write is I write a lot. So I'll tell you, in this new book, I talk about some of the same subjects that we're speaking of. I discover while I write, and parenthetically, the artistic director of the paper show Cartasia in Italy said that he thought that intuition is creativity. So I find that my intuition is still working. I'm complaining about living in a bubble, like I live in an overly white town. It's very lovely. Everyone's polite and friendly, which is annoying to me. There's way too much sun. I'm a New Yorker, so I don't like rain, 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 but I like some rain. I started to feel I need to look at my own fear of talking out loud instead of just complaining about the bubble outside of me. I took a class on working with men, and the leader suggested the book Violence by James Gilligan. He worked in men's prisons, and he writes about he thinks that all violence is an attempt at justice, an attempt to have retribution and reclaim what was lost. He talks about very violent crime having to do with one's eyes and one's mouth and real like mutilation. He felt has to do with shame, not wanting anybody to see one in a posture that is inconvenient or seems ugly. I started to think about two things about young man that I'm working with who's reluctant to confront somebody in his family. I thought he was very complacent. And then, boom, I read this book, and no, it's not complacency. He has shame. And I started to think about my shame and the shame a lot of people around me have. I think a lot of people don't do conflict in this bubble where we supposedly all agree with each other. I had a wonderful coffee with two women in the community. One is a professor at the university here, and she happens to be Black in a white place. We talked about that a little bit. We talked about this notion of shame and a habit in one of the schools of giving notes with a ram on them because that's the football team here. If a child is kind to their classmate, they get a note. And if they get many notes, they get something like they're a hero for a week. So I said to these women, I really hate that. One of them said, oh God, I hate that too. My son has never had one of those notes. He feels like a total failure. He's autistic and he has ADHD, and he has told me how much of a failure he feels. You have probably not said anything to anyone because you feel the shame of having the kid who doesn't get the note. And she said, exactly. I never thought I could say anything. And she's a bold woman. She's active politically, but in this case, she feels shame. She feels vulnerable. So I'm working on that a bit, how shame shows up and it stops people from exposing who they are.
I wonder if shame is the geometry of separation, where empathy is the resonance between two fields, as self and other. Is shame the collapse of that resonance inward? Is it a self interference pattern? Because it's clear it's some kind of distortion when awareness turns on itself and interprets dissonance as defect, as distinct from data for retuning.
You're very smart. I said this to you the last time, so I'm not sure I'm getting you correctly. I'm just going to go with an intuitive response, which is that Eric Erickson is quoted in the book. Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
He's okay. So he's quoted in the book, and he says that shame has to do with being seen when you're not ready to be seen. I think that part of the early trust, mistrust, set of feelings is that a child needs a lot of safety, needs an atmosphere of safety. I'm looking for a word, needs to be surrounded almost. It needs a protective cover so that at its best, a child is taking a risk in a relatively safe field. When a child can really object to what is going on or ask why something is happening, it's a risky thing unless there are safe people who are not invaders. When you think about adults who have not been given safety themselves, they treat children in a way that's invasive. They predict a child's feelings. One of the examples I have in Vulnerability Protected is about a small child who has been upset from a day with another child. A mother has interpreted this as, I see that you're very sad and it's okay to be very sad. Then the mother goes off and hears the child crying and comes in and says, what's happening? And said, you didn't get it. You didn't get it at all. I'm not sad. I'm mad. We are not trained to listen to ourselves or our children. I think we lose something from the very beginning because child rearing is not attuned for the most part, because to be attuned, you have to stop talking so much. You have to listen. Children say very interesting things. And by the way, you asked me how shadow work influenced me. It influenced me amazingly in my role as a mother because I had a kind of ADD kind of kid as my first, and he had a serious tendency to opposition. I knew because of what I had been through that just having an argument was not going to do it. If I said it was warm and he said it was cold, I could neutralize it by saying, how do you feel about listening to the weather lady, hearing what she says? I don't think I was that smart at the time to know this, but what I'm saying now to him, you feel invaded by me. I'm your mother. It's too close. You're feeling too vulnerable. What if we get another person whom we don't know? We don't know what she's going to say, and we're both able to be surprised because it could be warm, it could be cold, it could be both. He was okay with that. Plus, he did this thing once, like he was around two, and he said, Mommy, there's a bird. I looked up and I said, I don't see a bird. Again, there's a bird. I didn't see the bird. And he said it again. I looked up and I saw the bird. The lesson to me was when he says he's seeing something, he's seeing something. What I realized that kids, when they feel they can speak, I remember my daughter yelling at me for yelling at her. I didn't think I was yelling, but She said, "It's hard for me to hear you when you talk to me in that voice. I'm going to school now. Do you think I could learn anything if the teacher talked to me like that?" What was she, 7? A lot of kids stop talking very early because they don't feel listened to. I think when that happens, there's a kind of defensive cover that happens early. So a child stops listening to herself, even knowing what she's feeling. Empathy is already starting to topple. You mentioned politics, and I'm thinking about the word protest. If children are allowed to speak, what they do very often is they protest. They protest the rules that aren't fair. They protest the parents working out of their own moods, which is understandable, but they see it, and what they see, if it's valued, becomes a source of confidence, becomes a source of assertiveness, a source of knowing deeply.
I do want to circle back 'cause as you're speaking. I wrote something down. This is regarding shame. And I wonder if shame is a call to recalibration, not condemnation, because every dissonance serves to restore coherence of some kind. Therefore, is shame a feedback mechanism, not punishment, that alerts the organism that one's projected pattern has drifted from harmonic alignment, usually with the truth or empathy or integrity? If we witness that gently, it can cause some kind of rebalancing. But when resisted or suppressed, it crystallizes into guilt and self rejection or moral paralysis.
Yes, I think the key word is gently, and probably with the help of someone else. When someone is alone, what happens is, and this comes up in the book as well, but I know this, that one is ashamed of being ashamed. It keeps going. But it's interesting that when I was writing Vulnerability Protected, I was writing about the bubble effect of the town. I guess I was in a gentle space where I said to myself, what about me? What about my role? What am I doing? Somehow there was an opening so that I could actually say to myself as I was writing, someone gave me a snarky reply and I felt shame, that I froze. I had a feeling of space then, like I wasn't consumed. So I could reflect on what is this about and get curious about it. Whereas the young man I was talking about, before we spoke, and I inserted the idea of gentleness, he was locked in a loop. So he was feeling that this would never end. It kept recycling around him. There has to be a climate, a temperature, a safety, so that one can recalibrate, can go, oh, I can breathe, I can see, I can feel that it could be different. Kids are very prone to shame and they're very prone to being hard on themselves. We are all tend to blame ourselves,
Mm.
and that needs to be interrupted by a grown-up who can get down on their knees. I think I can still do it, even though I'm 79, and
The third time.
say, yeah, third time, and say, it doesn't have to be this way. That wasn't really such a terrible thing. Let me help you recalibrate at 3. Because when it starts at 50, it's a lot harder because you've taken in all of the societal criticisms and you've never had a good enough connection with yourself to assert the reality that you know deeply when you're getting images and messages that contradict that.
I wonder if shame has evolved as a social coherence signal, warns when behavior threatens connection with the collective, the same way that pain warns when the body is injured. So empathy binds. Therefore, does shame restore boundaries after disharmony? Because in healthy measure, it would refine empathy into responsibility, but in excess, it becomes toxic, turning awarenesses of misalignment into belief in unworthiness.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm thinking about a paper that Eric Erickson wrote on ethics and morality, and he saw ethics as a helpful code that included empathy. That really was the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Whereas he felt morality was more shame-based and involved more punishing and shunning. I think, in terms of what you're saying, could cause a collapsed empathy that doesn't exist anymore. If you just have shame because you feel that you're bad, and the only people you know are the people who have induced shame, your empathy is gone. But I hear what you're saying, and I think it's very important that vulnerability, if we know it well enough, can become a signal of friendliness, but also of danger. Because even though I'm talking about vulnerability protected, very often it's not safe to feel. And there are people in the world today who can't feel it at all because they're being attacked and violated. But at best, all of this can be a signal. It's almost like a wake-up call that gives a person the space to shift.
As we move into this era of mirrored intelligence, like AI, the humans are interfacing with reflective systems, then surely we need to reinterpret shame. Rather than moral error, can we look at shame as a mistuned signal between identity fields? So the self comparing its raw waveform into an idealized projection, because healing occurs when that comparison, I would suggest, is replaced by curiosity. The question
Yeah.
I would ask myself is, what frequency am I being invited to harmonize with?
Yeah. The other word I think that's helpful is compassion. And when people are helped to approach themselves with compassion, then curiosity has also more space. I think about AI. I don't know that much about it. I never use it if I'm writing something that I feel is important. But if I'm writing a letter or an email, I have an assist. It's interesting because I feel like I argue with it. Sometimes it's trying to get me to say something a certain way, and I'm not going to do it. And it learns that I'm just not going to do it that other way. So if it's a matter of correcting my grammar or making it more smooth, I'll consider it. But I guess what I'm thinking of is having the inner feeling of knowing or having the right to know what's going on inside. I helped a client of mine, a patient of mine, who wasn't ready to contact a family member. It seemed so stubborn, but once we talked about shame, it gave way because this young woman was able to say to her relative, I'm just not ready now, or I'm not ready now unless we have a mediator or a therapist because I'm worried, not just about you, but I'm worried about losing it. I'm worried about me. So this kind of self-knowing is what I'm calling vulnerability protected. It's somewhat vulnerable, but it has some safety. We're meant to be in a certain atmosphere of safety, whether it's in a tribe or being hugged and held and known. We're supposed to be known, and we're supposed to need other people throughout our lives and keep needing and then help others who are needing. I think of therapy really as, in a way, with other clinicians too, helping each other when we fall down and getting that help ourselves.
I was writing something down about protest because I found that interesting. I was thinking about the interference of projection and reception, the outward impulse to express, to create. You were talking about children protesting. So when that impulse to express and create meets an inward containment, the structure, the boundary, those two vectors are still learning balance. If the inward containment is too rigid, then projection collides with a wall because the energy rebounds as protest, whether it's crying or anger or rebellion. When containment is too loose, the projection dissipates into confusion and the protest becomes anxiety or withdrawal. So in both cases, is protest seeking a harmonic space? Is it seeking a recalibration between autonomy and belonging?
Yeah, well, I guess as you were talking, I was thinking of protest as a mood difficulty and with the need for help in coming from dysregulation to a certain kind of comfort, a certain kind of regulation so that everything is not chaotic. That's different from the protest that is more coherent and I guess an older kind of protest of an older child, even who is asking to be listened to and asking to be taken seriously. When the world says, no, you're a terrible person because you asked that question, I think one can sink further and further inwards. So one doesn't really hear oneself well.
Okay, so if protest is a signal, then the current frequency does not match my felt truth. So it's not inherently defiance, but is it a search for coherence?
I think, yeah,
Because the instinct to test reality until it feels truthful, because in healthy environments, protest is met with attuned empathy, boundaries that listen, and when heard, it stabilizes and protest can become understanding. But if it's suppressed or mocked, then that protest calcifies into resentment or shame.
absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing is, the amazing thing about protest is that when it's heard, the person who's hearing it can change as well. That's where you have an interdependence and a relationality and people evolving together and doing the best we can. I guess all the stuff that I'm dealing with probably comes from having certain moments of frustrated protest or protest that I didn't even know I was feeling. Then it comes up and it could come up with loneliness as an accompaniment, but it then opens a door for me to be curious about what is going on because I guess I've learned about signals. If I'm having this sense and it's recurring, I need to listen. And then what happens is in my own world, sometimes something creative happens where I have a shift and a wow moment. Even though the material is difficult, it's still inspiring. So, can I say something to you?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm really inspired by your intellect and by your curiosity, by the depth of your caring to be interested and to think even.
I'm inspired by you being that agency that amplifies this work and redefining what an elder is.
How is it redefining?
Jung calls it the senex, the one who descends, who gets dirty, who admits, I don't transcend this, I'm in it. You're still practicing, you're still doing your own work. That's a senex move in the best sense, because the wisdom that only comes from admitting that we're never done.
Yeah.
Please tell us about your new book and where can people find you or connect to the work that you do, Carol?
Okay. Well, it's called Vulnerability Protected and subtitled Visions of a Dancing Mind, and it will come out, let it be said, probably in about a month. I don't know how easily it's going to be available in the UK, but I think Amazon goes everywhere. And it's going to be by Dignity Press. Let me just say that I started to write this when I felt that vulnerability was becoming an in term, a smooth term. Let's gather together and be vulnerable and lean into it, and we're going to become brave. I'm thinking, what is this? I know that vulnerability is to me chaotic and somewhat scary, and to the people I work with, the same. So I said, I see it as somewhat messy. So I think I'll
Mm.
write about it. Honestly, and then Trump announced his candidacy, and I thought, holy shit, I'm going to write about it now because this is the man and the people around him who say, we are not vulnerable. We are anti-vulnerable. We want to crush vulnerability because we have been so hurt that we will hurt back and we will have a grandiose time of it. I thought, okay, so I have to write about that. Then I read a book called Caste, Caste, The Origin of Our Discontents. I thought, holy shit, again, I have to write about culture and I have to write about caste and I have to imbue the book with it. So it is sort of a dance, but it does have chapters that are clinical. Whose vulnerability is it anyway? It has a segment on George W. Bush, but it's really a clinical chapter. And the vulnerability and the gift of disappointment is a clinical chapter. And I have a chapter on me. And I said to a group recently, just in case you think this is an overly intellectual book, let me tell you, you just need to read chapter 2. I can't describe it. You have to get the book. I was kind of kidding, but it's a little out there. But I thought I'm sharing. And I talk about vulnerability protected and how it's so different than just vulnerability. And I think knowing our vulnerability is an obligation because it's the only way to be empathic. We can't empathize with someone, can't get into their shoes unless we get into our own, and it's kind of messy. I'm feeling really good about that. My website is thehumanclimate.com, www.thehumanclimate.com. My email address is Carol, Carol, at thehumanclimate.com. You can see I'm a communicator and it's not that popular, but I do love to share. I feel I'm growing up now too. So I do feel, as you were talking about elderness, that, yeah, I don't feel like the wise woman from the mountain. What I realize is I need community. I need support. I need people who get me. I don't need to join a religion that's going to give me a fakeness to it. I'm not pretending to know it all. If I did, my children wouldn't let me get away with it. So I hope we can stay in touch in some way.
Absolutely. Come back. There's a lot I hadn't gone through because we got on to talking about shame and protest and other things. I'm looking forward to reading Vulnerability. What comes to my mind is a membrane between you and the world, and it thins enough for energy and emotional truth to pass through. In every system, openness is how information flows and life renews itself. Without it, nothing grows, but too much of it, then the structure dissolves.
Right.
So vulnerability to me is the receptive vector of consciousness. It's the inward current that allows one's field to feel, to empathize, to learn. I think about nature and protection. It's not the denial of openness, it's the geometry that gives openness shape, because protection defines the rhythm, the pulse that lets vulnerability exist safely. You look in nature and every living thing keeps this rhythm. Shells open to feed, closed to rest, lungs open and close, hearts contract and release.